The man had been mopping the same stretch of marble floor for 11 minutes when the executive chef walked past him without blinking. That was fine. Elwood Cass was used to that. He was 61 years old, 6 feet even, with hands that had seen more kitchens than most culinary school graduates would visit in a lifetime. Those hands were wrapped around a mop handle right now, guiding gray water in slow figure eights across the lobby floor of the Hargrove Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta. His uniform was the color of old concrete. His name tag said Elwood in block letters, and beneath that faculties. Nobody read name tags in the Hargrove Grand. Not the guests, not the staff who outranked him, not the event coordinators in their blazers who walked through the lobby like they were auditioning for something. But tonight was different from the Tuesday nights Elwood usually worked. Tonight, the Hargrove Grand was hosting the annual Southeast Culinary Summit, the most important gathering of chefs, restaurateurs, food critics, and hospitality executives in the entire region. 300 guests, black tie. A dinner that had been planned for 8 months, catered by the hotel's own kitchen under the direction of a man named Victor Strand, who had won a James Beard Award 6 years ago and had not stopped mentioning it since. Elwood knew the menu. He had read it on the clipboard posted in the service corridor. He recognized every technique. He had invented 2 of them. Nobody at the Hargrove Grand knew who Elwood Cass was. That was not an accident. When he had applied for the facilities position 14 months ago, he had not listed his previous employment on the application. He had not mentioned the 18 years he spent as executive chef and co-owner of Cass and Moreau in New Orleans, a restaurant that had held 2 Michelin stars for 9 consecutive years before the partnership dissolved. He had not mentioned the consulting work he did for the James Beard Foundation, or the cookbook that still sold steadily in its 3rd edition, or the 3-month residency he had done at a culinary institute in Lyon. He had not mentioned any of it because none of it was why he was applying. He was applying because his daughter lived in Atlanta. Because after the restaurant closed and the partnership dissolved and the years of silence settled over him like weather, he had decided that proximity to Nadia and her 2 kids was worth more than prestige. He was applying because he needed something to do with his hands while he figured out what came next. What came next turned out to be 14 months of mopping floors, replacing burned-out light bulbs, unclogging drains, and being invisible to everyone in the building except the other facilities workers, most of whom were younger than him and called him Mr. E without knowing why they felt they should add the formality. He did not correct them. He liked it, actually. Mr. E like a secret. The summit dinner was scheduled to begin at 7. By 5:30, the grand ballroom on the 2nd floor was almost fully dressed. White tablecloths ironed sharp, crystal glassware stacked in perfect geometry, floral arrangements so large they looked architectural. The kitchen had been running since noon. Elwood had been on shift since 3, rotating between the lobby, the service corridors, and the loading dock, staying out of the ballroom because the event staff had made it clear that facilities personnel were not to be visible once setup began. At 6:15, he was passing through the 2nd floor corridor with a cart of replacement hand soap for the restrooms when he heard the argument. It was coming from the kitchen. 2 voices. One of them high and controlled, the kind of controlled that meant the person was barely holding something in. The other voice was lower, harder, and belonged to a man who was not used to being told no. Elwood slowed the cart. "I don't care what the timeline says," the lower voice said. "The beurre blanc is broken, and it's going to stay broken because your guy does not understand emulsification. He's been whisking it like it's a vinaigrette. Chef Strand, we have 40 minutes. I know how many minutes we have, Phyllis." A pause. "The halibut course is going to go out with a broken sauce, or it's not going to go out at all, and I will not put my name on a broken sauce in front of 300 people who write for food publications." Elwood stood very still in the corridor. A broken beurre blanc. He knew exactly what had gone wrong without seeing it. Someone had added the butter too fast, or the reduction had gotten too hot, or both. The fix was simple if you caught it in time. You needed an ice bath, a fresh reduction started separately, and patience. The whole rescue took 8 minutes if you knew what you were doing. He stood there for another 4 seconds. Then he knocked on the kitchen door. The woman who opened it, Phyllis, apparently, in an event coordinator blazer, looked at him the way people looked at a utility vehicle that had pulled into the wrong lane. "Facilities has to stay out of the..." I heard you have a broken beurre blanc, Elwood said. She stared at him. I can fix it, he said. I've got about 35 minutes before the sauce is too far gone. If it isn't already, sir, this is a professional kitchen, and tonight we have ma'am. His voice was quiet, not aggressive, just certain. I'm not here to cause a problem. I'm here because I know what's wrong and I know how to fix it, and the people in that room are about to pay $400 a plate for halibut with separated sauce. Now you can close this door and I'll go back to my cart, or you can let me try. Either way, the clock is moving. Phyllis looked at him for one more second, then she stepped aside. Victor Strand was standing at the sauce station with his arms crossed and his jaw set, watching a young line cook stir a pot of what had clearly become a greasy, grayish mistake. Strand was 44, medium height, with the kind of posture that announced he had once been told he was gifted, and had organized his entire personality around the information. He did not look up when Elwood walked in. "Who is this?" Strand said to Phyllis. "He says he can fix the sauce." Strand looked up then. He looked at Elwood's concrete gray uniform. He looked at the name tag. He looked at the mop calluses on Elwood's hands. "Your facilities," Strand said. "Right now, I'm the person who can rescue your halibut course," Elwood said. "You want to talk about my badge or you want to save the dinner?" The kitchen was quiet for a moment. 3 line cooks were watching from their stations. The young cook at the sauce station had stopped stirring. Strand's eyes narrowed. "You have culinary training?" "Some," Elwood said. He moved to the sauce station without waiting for an answer. He picked up the pot, checked the consistency, smelled it. He set it down and turned to the line cook. "Start a fresh reduction. 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar, 1 shallot, fine mince. Medium heat. Now." He turned to look around the kitchen. "Ice bath, please, and I need a new pot, clean and cold butter, cubed, not melted." Nobody moved. He did not raise his voice. He simply waited, with the particular patience of a man who has run kitchens for 2 decades, and knows that the moment always comes when people decide whether they're going to trust the person in front of them. Strand watched him. Something moved across his face. Not respect, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Professional curiosity, maybe. The recognition that this man was not confused about what he was doing. "Do it," Strand said to the kitchen. The kitchen moved. Elwood worked for 22 minutes. He didn't explain what he was doing step by step. He just did it. The new reduction built carefully. The broken sauce rescued into the ice bath to stop its temperature. The fresh emulsion built from scratch with cold butter, added 1 cube at a time while the reduction was still warm but not hot, whisking in slow, confident circles. The 3 line cooks watched him the way students watch when something clicks. At one point, Strand stepped closer. He watched Elwood's hands. "You're incorporating at a 45-degree angle," Strand said. "Reduces the air incorporation," Elwood said. "Gives you a cleaner mouth feel." Strand was quiet. "Where'd you learn that?" he finally said. "Leon," Elwood said. "Long time ago." He lifted the spoon and tasted the sauce, adjusted with a pinch of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of lemon. Tasted again. He held the spoon out to Strand. Strand tasted it. His face didn't change much, but something behind his eyes did. "That's correct," Strand said, which in chef's language was approximately equivalent to anyone else saying that's extraordinary. "It'll hold for service," Elwood said. "Keep it at a low warm, don't let anyone touch the heat, and stir it every 5 minutes with this." He showed the young line cook the angle. "Like this. Not like a vinaigrette, like you're asking it a question." The line cook nodded. Elwood wiped his hands on a towel, set it down, and turned toward the door. He was back in the corridor with his cart when he heard Strand's voice behind him. "Hey!" Elwood stopped. Strand was standing in the kitchen doorway. He was looking at Elwood differently now. Not warmly, Strand was not a warm man, but with a kind of recalibrating attention. "Who are you?" Strand said. Elwood said. "That's not what I'm asking." Elwood looked at him for a moment. "I know," he said. He started walking. The dinner went beautifully. Elwood knew because he was in the service corridor at 7:45, replacing a flickering sconce near the ballroom entrance, and he could hear the room through the wall. The particular quality of silence that falls over 300 people when a plate arrives, and they take the first bite and find it exactly right. That silence. He had lived inside that silence for 18 years, and he still recognized it anywhere. He went home at 10:30. His daughter Nadia called at 11. "How was work, Dad?" "Quiet," he said. What Elwood did not know was that one of the 300 guests at the Southeast Culinary Summit was a food journalist named Cecily Odom. who wrote a weekly column for a national publication and had been covering the Atlanta dining scene for 12 years. He did not know that Cecily had excused herself during the halibut course to use the restroom and had passed through the second-floor corridor and had stopped in front of the service window that looked into the kitchen and had watched through the glass for 40 seconds before the event staff directed her back to the main hallway. She had watched a man in a gray facilities uniform working a sauce station with the quiet authority of someone who had done it 10,000 times before. She had noted his name tag, Elwood, faculties. She had written it in her phone. 2 weeks later, Elwood was in the loading dock at 7 a.m. when his supervisor Raymond waved him down from across the lot. Cass, main office, now. Raymond said it in the particular way of a man who was not entirely sure what was happening, but suspected it was above his pay grade. The main office of the Hargrove Grand was on the 3rd floor, behind a set of glass doors that Elwood had cleaned twice in the past year but never walked through. The general manager, a man named Douglas Hale, was standing beside his own desk rather than sitting behind it, which Elwood read immediately as a man who wanted to appear informal but was nervous about something. There was also a woman sitting in the chair across from the desk. She was in her mid-40s with a legal pad on her knee and the specific alertness of someone who was used to getting to the point. "Mr. Cass," Hale said. "Thank you for coming up. This is Cecily Odom she writes for." "I know who she writes for," Elwood said. Cecily Odom looked at him. "You know my work? You did the piece on the decline of French technique in American fine dining about 3 years ago. I disagreed with about a third of it, but the central argument was solid." Cecily Odom set her pen down. "And what was your disagreement? You were too easy on the culinary school system. The real problem isn't that chefs don't value French technique anymore. It's that the schools stopped teaching them why it works, so they can't adapt it. They can follow a recipe for beurre blanc. They can't rescue one." The room was quiet. Douglas Hale looked between them. Cecily picked her pen back up. "I'd like to know how a man with your background ends up in facilities at the Hargrove Grand. I'd like to know how you know my background," Elwood said. "I looked you up after the summit." She paused. Elwood Cass, co-founder Cass and Moreau. Two-Michelin-Stars, 2008 through 2016. James Beard Foundation Consulting, 2014 to 2019. Author of "I Know My Own Resume," Elwood said. "Then you know why I'm here." He sat down. He didn't mean to. He just did the way a person sits down when something they have been holding at a distance for a long time suddenly walks into the same room. "The restaurant closed," he said. "The partnership dissolved. My business partner, we had different ideas about what we were building, and when we disagreed about the direction, it turned out that his name was on more of the paperwork than mine was." He said it plainly, without self-pity. "The way you describe weather." "I'm sorry," Cecily said. "I'm not." He looked at his hands. "I learned what I needed to learn. I moved to Atlanta to be near my daughter and grandkids. I took a job that let me keep my hands busy while I figured out what was next." He paused. "I'm still figuring. What would next look like?" Cecily asked. Elwood was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about a small place," he said. "Not like the old restaurant, nothing that size. Something 30 seats maybe. Neighborhood. The kind of cooking that doesn't need to explain itself. That just tastes like the thing it's supposed to taste like." He stopped. "I shouldn't be telling you this. Why not? Because you write for a national publication, and I'm a man in a gray uniform in my general manager's office, and I haven't cooked professionally in 14 months. And what I just described sounds like either a dream or a plan, and right now I'm not sure which one it is." Cecily Odom looked at him for a long time. Then she wrote something on her legal pad. "Mr. Cass," she said, "can I tell you something?" "Go ahead." "I have sat across from every major culinary figure in this country over the past 12 years. I have interviewed people with 3 Michelin stars and their own television shows and cookbooks that sell 200,000 copies. And I have watched almost all of them answer the question, what would next look like with a description of something bigger, more, grander, more famous?" She paused. "You just described smaller, better, quieter. And you said it like it scared you a little." Elwood looked at her. "That's the first interesting answer I've gotten to that question in about 4 years," she said. The piece ran 6 weeks later. It was not a short piece. Cecily Odom did not write short pieces when she found something worth the length. It ran 4,000 words in the Sunday edition of the publication, accompanied by a photograph. Not a posed photograph, but a candid one that the publication's photographer had taken on a follow-up visit, catching Elwood at the sauce station in a Hargrove kitchen where Strand had quietly invited him to come in on 2 Saturday mornings to work alongside the line. In the photograph, he was not in his gray uniform. He was in a chef's coat, white, borrowed. His hands were and his face had the expression of a man who was entirely uncomplicatedly present. The headline read, "The chef who mopped the floors of the hotel that didn't know his name." Elwood's phone began ringing the Monday after publication. He did not answer most of the calls. Nadia answered some of them for him, writing names and numbers on a legal pad at her kitchen table, while her kids did homework at the other end. By Wednesday, there were 31 messages. By Friday, there were over 100. 3 were from investors. 1 was from a culinary institute asking if he would consider a guest residency. 1 was from a former line cook who had worked under him at Cass and Moreau 15 years ago, who was now running his own kitchen in Memphis, and said he had always wanted to say thank you for teaching him to ask a sauce a question instead of commanding it. Elwood read that 3 times. What happened next did not happen quietly, which was the part Elwood had not prepared for. The story was picked up by 3 national outlets. Then it found social media, the way stories do when they carry the particular combination of injustice and dignity and quiet resilience that people need to feel in their chest at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. The comments were not all gentle. Some people were angry at the restaurant industry that had pushed him out, at the business partner who had taken the paperwork, at a system that let a 2-Michelin-Star chef spend 14 months replacing hand soap in hotel restrooms, while the people who ran those restrooms didn't know enough to ask who he was. Some people were angry at Elwood himself, in the specific way that people are angry at someone they admire for having been too quiet about something. "You should have said something," one commenter wrote. "A man with your credentials doesn't have to disappear." As if invisibility were always a choice. As if a 61-year-old black man in the restaurant industry hadn't spent enough years learning exactly what happened when you stopped being useful to the people who held the leases. Victor Strand gave a brief statement to a trade publication. He called Elwood a highly skilled professional and said the hotel was fortunate to have had him on staff. He did not mention the beurre blanc. He did not mention standing in the kitchen doorway saying, "Who are you?" The trade publication ran the statement without context, which was its own kind of comment. Douglas Hale, the general manager, sent Elwood a formal letter expressing the hotel's pride in his contributions and its excitement about his future. He also quietly approved a retroactive reclassification of Elwood's employment status that resulted in a small additional payment for the 2 Saturday kitchen sessions. It was a number that would not have impressed anyone at the summit dinner. Elwood cashed the check and put half of it in an account he had started for his granddaughter. The investor meeting happened on a Thursday in October in a conference room in Midtown Atlanta. There were 2 of them, a woman named Harston, who ran a hospitality group, and a man named Teague, who had backed 3 restaurant openings in the last 5 years. They were professional, prepared, and genuinely interested. They had read the article. They had done additional research. They had a number in mind. Elwood sat across from them with a legal pad of his own. He had spent a week thinking about what he wanted to say in this room. He had sat at Nadia's kitchen table at 6 in the morning with coffee and the legal pad, writing things down and crossing them out. He had called his old sous chef, a man named Devlin, who now consulted for restaurant groups in Chicago, and they had talked for 2 hours about lease structures and equity splits, and what the words controlling interest actually meant in practice and why it mattered. When Harston named the number, Elwood wrote it down. Then he wrote down the equity split she was proposing beside it. Then he looked up. "I need 60%, he said. "We were thinking, I know what you were thinking," Elwood said. "And I understand the logic. You're putting in capital and you want protection. That's reasonable." He put the pen down. "I put 18 years into the last restaurant. I was at 45%. When the partnership dissolved, I lost the name, the lease, and the client relationships, because 45% is not enough to protect the thing you built." He looked at them both. "I'm not doing that again." Harston and Teague exchanged a look. 60% with a right of first refusal on any future sale, Elwood continued. "I take a below-market salary for the first 18 months to offset your risk exposure. And I want it in writing that the culinary direction is mine, completely. with no consultation requirement on menu decisions. The room was quiet for a moment. "You've thought about this," Teague said. "For 14 months, Elwood said. "I had a lot of time while I was mopping." Harston laughed. It was a real laugh, short and surprised. She looked at Teague, something passed between them. "We'll need to look at the numbers," she said. "Take the time you need," Elwood said. "I'm not in a hurry." He paused. "Well, I'm a little in a hurry. I'm 61, but not so much that I'll take a bad deal." The restaurant opened the following spring. 32 seats. A neighborhood in West Atlanta that had been waiting for something like this without knowing exactly what it was waiting for. The space was a converted print shop with original brick walls and windows that let in the kind of afternoon light that made everything look like it was about to be remembered. Elwood named it after nothing famous. He named it Cass, which was just his name, which was enough. The menu changed weekly. It was rooted in the Gulf Coast cooking he had grown up with in Louisiana, refined by French classical technique, extended by whatever he had been thinking about, or reading about, or remembering that week. There were no foam elements. There was no molecular anything. There was a crawfish bisque that a reviewer described as tasting like an argument you didn't know you'd been waiting to have with your grandmother, which Elwood considered the best review he had ever received. The James Beard Foundation invited him to speak at their annual symposium. He declined the first year because he was too busy. He accepted the second year and gave a 20-minute talk about the difference between a kitchen that runs on fear and a kitchen that runs on curiosity, and what it costs a culinary culture when those two things get confused. He did not mention Victor Strand by name. He didn't need to. On the evening of the restaurant's first anniversary, Nadia came in for dinner with her husband and both kids. Elwood came out of the kitchen between courses, which he did not usually do, and sat with them for 7 minutes at the corner table by the big windows. His granddaughter, who was 8, looked at him seriously across the table. "Grandpa," she said, "why does your food make people cry?" Elwood thought about it. "Because it reminds them of something," he said. "What does it remind them of?" He looked out the window at West Atlanta, going about its Thursday evening, the streetlights just beginning to assert themselves against the October dusk. "That they're worth feeding well," he said. His granddaughter considered this with the gravity that 8-year-olds bring to things that feel important. "Okay," she said, and went back to her bisque. Elwood watched her eat and said nothing else, and the kitchen behind him hummed with the particular sound of people doing difficult things carefully, which had always been to him the most beautiful sound in the world.